folks, I'm Wayne Duvenage, and this is OUTA's Weekly Wrap. It's the 6th of March, first week of the first quarter behind us already. And as with every week in South Africa, this was just another one of those where the news cycle rolled in thick and fast. Almost daily questions about poor governance, lack of consequences run amok within the state departments and municipalities, and really just across the country. And as we head closer to local government elections this year, you can already see the political temperature rising. Billboards and political messaging is getting sharper, and without doubt, municipal electioneering is now in full swing. But before we get into the big issues this week, I want to pause for a moment and just acknowledge the passing of Musia Lakota. Lakota was part of South Africa's political landscape for many years. He served in government, and he was part of the liberation struggle, and later became somebody who was willing to challenge power when he believed things were going wrong. And he formed COPE, the first political party which was a breakaway from the ANC at the time. Very often people think that was the EFF. It wasn't. It was COPE. EFF came later, and then MK, quite a few breakaways from the ANC. But whether you agreed with his politics or not, figures like Lakota remind us that public life should be about principle. Leadership is not just about holding public office. It means questioning dubious decisions and challenging wrongdoing and speaking up when the country is heading down the wrong path. This is something we need to do a lot more of right now. But let's start with what happened at the National Department of Health, which was made news this week. Several senior officials, including Director General Sandile Buthelezi, were arrested in connection with these allegations of fraud and theft involving funds linked to the Global Fund program. Now, this is not a small department. This is not a budget or a department with a small budget we're talking about here. And the Global Fund provides international support that helps countries like South Africa tackle diseases such as HIV and tuberculosis. So when you hear allegations that money connected to that program may have been misused, it is deeply troubling. And it gets international donors wondering whether they should be assisting South Africa in future social development and social challenges and programs of this nature. This funding exists to support the healthcare programs that saves lives. And instead, once again, we're dealing with allegations of public funds that may have been diverted for private benefit. Now, of course, the legal process must run its course and the courts will deal with the evidence. But the fact is that these arrests have taken place, and that tells us that something has gone wrong. And while we're talking about what has gone wrong with managing public funds, OUTA has finalized its report, and this is a very important one, on its investigations, quite extensive ones, into the NSFAS student accommodation scheme. And I urge you to take a look at this report. It's quite a lengthy one, but it gives a lot of detail. And it shows how millions of rands have been siphoned off to connected networks in government. So a little bit about it. We explain in this report how the student accommodation registration scheme was introduced by NSFAS to manage the accreditation and payment of fees to accommodation providers for students who qualified for NSFAS loans. It was introduced, by the way, when Andile Nongogo was still the CEO of NSFAS, and Ernest Khoza was the chairperson, and Bladen Zamande was the minister. All of these people no longer fulfill those positions anymore, but they were the architects behind this scheme. And the scheme and the system is meant to improve access to accommodation for students funded by NSFAS. That's the National Student Finance Aid Scheme. But what our investigation shows is that the scheme became far more complicated than its original intention, and more top layers were put into it and hatched, and additional plans escalated to extract more money out of the system. And that money goes to enriching undeserving beneficiaries. So instead of the funds flowing directly between NSFAS and the accreditation service providers, It involved multiple intermediaries, such as portal operators. So there was this portal that you had to go and register your accommodation on, and that the students need to seek their accommodation and book it. And the portal operators made a lot of money in this. And then you've got these accreditation agents who need to go out there and check on the accommodation, whether they meet the service standards. They get paid out of the system as well, and other additional layers of administration. So lots of feeding troughs in the networks here, let me tell you. And, you know, while Blade Nzimande at the time announced that there was also going to be a reduction in the revenues paid over to these private accommodation service providers, which was quite frustrating for them. But when you see monies flowing where they shouldn't flow, you've got to start asking the questions. What has happened here? Well, what has happened is that besides the fact that a lot of the proper, service providers of accommodation had to now go and register on this portal, our investigation shows where the corruption crept in. There are many accommodation suppliers on this on this platform that really were not providing accommodation to students. In one instance, we show a property listed as accommodating up to 200 students when it was nothing more than a 4-bedroom home in a residential area. And there are quite a few of these incidences that we point out, where we went to site and had a look and asked people around the building, what is this building all about? It had nothing to do with student accommodation. These are vacant old office blocks and old buildings that don't really accommodate students. So clearly, there have been weaknesses in the oversight mechanisms, and quite frankly, we believe that the scheme was almost deliberately set up to be able to be infiltrated in this manner. And what you're finding is that there are a lot of accommodation service providers to the NSFAS scheme that were not housing students. Millions of rands. And millions of rands flowed to the 4 organizations that set up the portal and tried to manage this whole process. There are a lot of conflicts of interest between accreditation agents and portal service providers and accommodation service providers. It really is just a cesspool of maladministration and corruption. Hopefully our report is going to make its way, or we know our report is going to make its way to various players in the criminal justice system. We're going to be sharing this with the NPA, with the Hawks, with the Special Investigations Unit, the Public Protector, the Auditor General, as well as the people at NSFAS, the board itself. And remember, the board now needs to look at this and take action, and hopefully the minister will take action as well. But we don't hold our breath there too much, because we've seen so much wrongdoing in higher education, which we've pointed out to the minister, and very little is being done. But what OUTA is ultimately calling for is urgent reform in this whole student accommodation and accreditation space, because the system is here to serve students and not to become a revenue stream for intermediaries and connected cronies. So let's watch the space, and we'll bring you more on that as the report finds its way to the various role players. So as you know, in a country where the rule of law works for its citizens, a number of people would be rounded up on a matter like this, and they would be prosecuted and end up in court. And while investigations like this are uncovering weaknesses in current systems, we're also reminded this week that corruption cases from the state capture era are slowly working their way through the courts. So what you did here, if you didn't, former ANC Member of Parliament Vincent Smith has finally been sentenced to prison. And he's got 7 years in prison for corruption linked to the Bosasa scandal. And Bosasa, you may know, got lucrative tenders, billions of rands from the tenders that were given to correctional services, and this matter was just long overdue. But we've got to celebrate the fact that, you know, while the long arm of the law might work slowly, it's working in the right direction. And this is one of the first big fishes, a person in a position of power in government that has now been held accountable. So what does this mean? Well, bribery and widespread corruption and influence by senior officials is unacceptable, and we cannot tolerate this. He chaired, by the way, Vincent Smith chaired Parliament's Correctional Services Committee, and so he just really got in the way of the investigations that needed to take place. He slowed things down, and he really deflected as much as he could to prevent Bosasa from being held accountable. But this is one where we start asking bigger questions. There are others in the ANC. There are others in positions of power, like Gwede Mantashe and Nomvulo Mokonyane, who also handsomely benefited from gratification by Bosasa. Where are they in this process? Are they being charged? Are their cases being investigated? Because we would love to see them and others, by the way, in the dock answering the tough questions that they need to answer. So sentences like this that are finally handed down remind us that persistence matters. Investigations matter. Pressure from journalists and investigators and civil society, it really all does matter. And that brings us to another issue that continues to hover within the national conversation, and that is the Phala Phala cash in the couch matter involving President Cyril Ramaphosa. Now, this issue raised its head again, this time not for the fact that there was money or theft of money in his couch, but that the issue around transparency is now coming to the fore. Pressure is mounting now on Police Minister Feroz Kochalia to declassify and release this report that was compiled by IPID, the Independent Police Investigative Directorate, into these events that happened at Phala Phala. IPID completed its investigation, as we know, some time ago. The obvious question is, why hasn't the public been able to see this report? We're told that the investigations have now produced findings, and yet the report remains classified. And that creates a problem for us because when a serious matter that involves the highest office in the land, that's the president's office, transparency becomes more important than ever before. I mean, if you or I were found to be stashing hundreds of thousands of foreign currency in our homes, anywhere, couches, offices, and no paperwork to substantiate this, we would be in serious trouble. And there are serious consequences for evading exchange control regulations, which restrict individuals as to how much foreign currency they may hold or move around. And if it's not transacted through authorized banks, that's a problem. So not only should this money be seized if it was your and my money, we as perpetrators would be criminally charged. You should be. And there are big penalties for this and stiff imprisonment conditions that come with it. 5 years if you contravene the control exchange regulations, as well as money laundering. If you are accused of and found guilty of money laundering, then you can get up to 30 years of imprisonment. So, you'd have to have a very good excuse and defense to escape this matter. And yet, it would appear that some people are more equal than others. So it's natural for the public to demand transparency and know what has this investigation found, because we want to understand where the proper processes were followed. We want to know and see what evidence led to the conclusions, and then to see if the rule of law is now being applied. Because if it doesn't get applied, well, it opens the door for all of us to start transacting in cash, in foreign currencies, and not declaring the proceeds to SARS and to the Reserve Bank. And that's the start of chaos in a financial system in a country. We've got these rules for a purpose, and that everybody needs to abide by them. So this is not about political point scoring. It's about a simple matter of principle. The rule of law must apply equally to everyone. And speaking of trust in the policing and justice system, we've seen some interesting developments at the Madlanga Commission this week. As you know, it is examining the allegations of criminal infiltration into parts of our justice and policing system. And this week, Major-General Shibiri, a senior official in the police, appeared again before the commission and responding to the allegation of a 70,000 rand payment, which he received from Musi Cat Matlala, who's been in the news a lot. Now, Shibiri is actually acknowledging that and admitting that he received this cash, but now he's claiming it was a loan. I mean, we've heard this before by the previous Justice Minister, who was the mayor in Polokwane. These amounts of money that are given to people they're loans. They're quickly paid back and then treated as loans. Well, we can see through all of that. And then suddenly he indicates that he didn't really know that Matlala was a person involved in criminal activities or some cartel. It's amazing how suddenly everybody just doesn't know what's happening. But they'll take these so-called loans and hopefully nobody's watching. And if no one is watching and they can get away with it, it's a totally different story. So he denies that he's been on Matlala's payroll or providing political favors in exchange for the money. And he denies that he's attempted to influence or delay the investigations into the 2024 murder of Armand Swart, the engineer who was murdered in Infiltration. Now, these are exactly the kind of issues that the Commission is trying to unpack. But as we say, as the late Praveen Gordhan said, you just have to join the dots to realize that something is amiss here. And we'll have to wait to see how the Commission joins the dots on Shibiri's conduct. But for now, it's not looking good. So at the same time, the Commission has been dealing with the issue of a businessman, Brian Mokgotsi, who was expected to appear but instead submitted a medical certificate. And the Commission confirmed it's going to take a good look and review that documentation at its next sitting. And it's worth remembering, though, that we're supposed to be in the final month of the Madlanga Commission's work. And there's a lot riding on these findings and a lot that will emerge from this process. And the Commission's work just goes to the heart of public trust in the justice system. And its findings will carry forward into formal charges that will flow into our courts. So we really hope that we can get as much done in this final month. I've got a feeling that the Commission is going to have to ask for extended time. And another story, though, this week that deserves attention comes out of Ekurhuleni and another strong investigation from Jeff Wicks at News 24. You'll remember we've spoken before about former Ekurhuleni city manager Imogen Mashazi and the 3.5 million rand private jet trip to London. Well, there's an update to the story. Reports are now showing that in that flight alongside Mashazi was Johannesburg pharmacist and businesswoman Dineo Seletswane, as well as Santon ophthalmologist Tebogo Maleka. This wasn't a commercial flight. It was a chartered flight. And the total cost is 3.5 million rand. Here's where it gets interesting. Mashazi was the Ekurhuleni city manager at the time and reportedly did not declare this flight as a gift. Well, who paid for it? And it matters because Ekurhuleni's own policies require gifts above a certain threshold, which is much lower than 3.5 million, to be declared and recorded, which he didn't do. And if you don't declare these gifts, you can be accused of avoiding scrutiny that disclosure is meant to bring. Well, within a year of that trip, Seletswane landed a contract with Ekurhuleni worth about 10 million rand linked to a fuel supply tender. And you've got to ask yourself the obvious question. Is that simply coincidence? Or does it show the kind of risks that arise when relationships sit too close to procurement decisions? To be clear, though, a contract on its own doesn't necessarily prove wrongdoing. But when a private jet trip involving a senior municipal official is followed by a lucrative municipal tender and an award to somebody, the public has every right to demand answers. According to reporting, questions about who paid for the flight, the purpose of the trip, and the nature of the relationship involved has largely gone unanswered. And we need answers to this. And refusal to engage with legitimate questions doesn't calm down the public's concerns here. It just raises more questions, and we need those questions answered. So we don't think Misuse is going to get away with not being scrutinized on this matter. We also saw some other tension spilling out into Parliament this week. Last week, forensic investigator Paul O'Sullivan appeared before Parliament's ad hoc committee, which is investigation, similar to the Madlanga Commission, investigating allegations of infiltration of law enforcement. And the hearing has become heated at times. At one point, as we know last week, O'Sullivan walked out of the session for various reasons that have been provided and debated. But this week he returned and he apologized to Parliament for the walkout. I think Paul O'Sullivan realized there may be some consequences to that. But he also told MPs that he had moved his family overseas because of threats to their safety. And at the same time, others appearing before the committee have made serious allegations against O'Sullivan. Some claim that he's attempted to infiltrate the IPID, the Independent Police Investigative Directorate, and others accuse him of intimidation. And so we've got so many competing allegations and strong personalities involved in what's taking place at the ad hoc committee. But it is exactly why these kinds of oversight processes need to stay focused on the evidence and not be sidetracked and not be delayed and take time in arguments and discussions that are really irrelevant to the process. Because when the hearings turn into disputes between individuals and the real purpose of the investigation is lost, we are really just wasting precious time in these investigations. And if people involved in exposing corruption believe that their families are at risk, well, that's also a serious problem for our democracy. And investigators, witnesses, we've seen how they get intimidated into silence. Corruption networks just simply continue to operate as people just put their heads down as a result of all this intimidation. We really need to get on top of this problem. Moving to Johannesburg this week, we saw a devastating incident when a building under construction collapsed in the Omonde area and several workers have lost their lives. This is a serious, serious matter. The city of Joburg claims that the building was illegal. Its inspectors were never around to see this construction because it wasn't even notified that building was taking place. The immediate question arises, if this building is taking place illegally, how does it reach a point of collapse before the authorities intervene? Why are the inspectors not aware? Why is the city not aware of this? Where are the enforcement mechanisms? This stuff just feels so uncomfortably similar to what happened in George a couple of years ago, where a building collapsed there. Verulam recently in December 2025, a 4-story temple collapsed. And this starts to signal, you have to just look at Nigeria, where we see buildings collapsing there, the lack of rule of law. We've got laws and rules and bylaws in place for a reason. And if people are able to circumvent those laws and start building without getting any permission to do so, why is this? The city and local government cannot look away. They cannot just say, well, it's not our problem if people don't want to register their buildings. It is your problem as the authorities. You need to put in place mechanisms that you can find out from neighbors, from people in those areas, as to is there construction or isn't there, and what are you doing about it? So they can get on top of these problems, and they should stop shifting the blame and look introspectively at how to resolve these issues. Because if they don't, we see once again local government inefficiencies and systems failing to enforce regulations, and the cost of that is measured in lives. And that's what's sad. So the Omonde collapse has drawn a comment now as well from national government, where Public Works Minister Dean McPherson is also starting to crack down and directing the Council for Built Environment, the CBE, to lead a technical governance and regulatory inquiry into this collapse, and vowing that the findings would be made public and those found complicit would face consequences. Well, it's great to hear that. We need to see consequences. So hopefully McPherson's energy in this space is going to lead to consequences. And he's obviously announced his plans to meet with the Minister of Human Settlements and review and expedite the enforcement of building standards nationally, because we've seen far too much of this shenanigans taking place. Interestingly, though, McPherson has also been in the headlines for completely a different reason this week. It's an old issue raised by Action SA and others, criticizing that taxpayers have funded a trip that he took to Brazil, over 800,000 Rand. This happened last year in June. It was something that was raised by Senzo Mchunu at the time, and the Public Protector is looking into it. Of course, this is resurfacing now, probably due to the political landscape that's heating up en route to the local elections. And McPherson has defended the trip, saying it was less than half that was claimed. But here's the thing. Just because something falls within policy, if you claim it is in policy and that's what's going to be investigated, does it make the decision right? In a country where millions of South Africans are struggling financially, government leaders have to think carefully about how they spend public money. It's about perception more so than the legality sometimes. And that issue of priorities has also showed up this week in Johannesburg, where city councillors approved lovely salary increases for themselves while residents continue to deal with water outages and infrastructure breakdowns and problems and billing chaos. Really, what is going on here? What message is this sending to the public? We are struggling as residents in Johannesburg with basic services, and councillors are voting to increase their own salaries. This is preposterous. It sends the wrong message to the electorate. And I almost get the impression that the ANC in Johannesburg probably realize they're on a hiding to nothing at the local elections later this year. And they start to act carelessly and recklessly in self-enrichment decisions. The eating frenzy, let me tell you, is heating up. That's what we're seeing at OUTA, not only at local government level, but at provincial and national government. I mean, another example of just crazy decisions happened in Durban, which we saw this week, where a 22 million Rand unveiling of a statue of Nelson Mandela and Oliver Tambo was unveiled. Nobody's questioning the role that Mandela and Tambo played in our history. But this is about timing and about priorities. When communities are struggling with failing infrastructure and service delivery problems, continue to mount, spending tens of millions of rands on statues is always going to raise eyebrows. It appears to me that the ANC is just clinging on to Madiba's legacy to try and remind the electorate of why the ANC should be still relevant today. It isn't, and we shouldn't be doing this. Now let's turn to an issue that OUTA has been working on very closely. This is the solar power issue, this registration issue. What we are seeing is that municipalities, as we've said in the past, everybody's dealing with this differently. And what we're seeing as well is a lot of arrogance coming to the fore, and how municipalities are forcing residents to apply and get permission before they can fit solar systems to their houses in some municipalities. And charges are being applied. And additional tariffs or different tariffs are being applied. Look, it's important to know this, and this is our stance. What happens behind the meter, that's this side in the property, the meter, is up to a law that has got nothing to do with the municipalities or Eskom. Those laws are governed by the OSH Act, by Occupational Health and Safety. Those laws are governed by SANS regulations and standards. And quite frankly, we believe that municipalities and Eskom are overreaching. They're abusing their power on this matter. And unless something changes here, and unless these threats stop, and unless this behavior stops, then I'm afraid it's going to have to be a court of law that is going to have to rule on this matter. We've had some serious meetings with people in positions of power, both at Eskom and in local government. And we will work as hard as we can to resolve this matter on behalf of society. Why? Because it is a matter that society's liberties, society's freedoms are being usurped and taken away from them as a result of this abuse of power, quite frankly, by local and national government. So watch this space. As far as we're concerned, Eskom's deadline, which is supposed to come to a head at the end of this month, is going to have to change. Something's going to have to change. If they push it out, we'll have to see why they're doing so. And if they scrap these requirements, well, that would be an interesting development. But let's see what happens. We'll keep you posted on that. But quite frankly, we maintain that the law is clear. People have stepped in to solve their own energy problems because government couldn't provide reliable electricity. People have also stepped in to reduce their reliance on expensive electricity. They have rights to do so. Now those citizens are being treated as if they are the problem, and that's not the case. So we will, as I said, keep you updated, and we are, as I've always said, prepared to challenge this matter. This fight is not over. While we're talking closely about energy and the cost of living, we also need to look at what's happening globally. There's no doubt that our petrol prices are going to go up. Our petrol prices have already gone up slightly with tax increases, as announced by the Minister of Finance in the budget speech last week. But more worryingly is what the tensions that are spilling out into the Middle East, where the Strait of Hormuz is being constrained. And this is where the important oil shipping routes move oil into the world markets. And that disruption is causing global oil prices to rise. We are not going to escape that, I can assure you. We've enjoyed some price reductions down to around 20 Rand a litre. We've been as high as 25 Rand a litre not so long ago. And for a brief period until peace reigns in the Middle East, these prices are going to start ramping up quite hectically. And it also depends on what happens with our exchange rate. It's that simple. So we will always be caught up in geopolitical tensions. The question is how do we ensure that we don't get caught up in political tensions that arise where we didn't need to become the scrutiny of world powers? And those questions are being asked around how is the president going to deal with this issue on the Iranian military debacle that took place at the beginning of the year, where Iran was asked to step down and not participate in warfare strategies off our coasts, and yet they didn't. They continued to participate. And that instruction was given by the commander-in-chief of this country, the president himself. Now, when somebody in a position of military ignores an instruction from the top, from the president, normally a court-martialed situation arises and that person faces the wrath of law. They are removed and they are dealt with accordingly. Well, the president removed that inquiry from the Minister of Defense to his office. Why is that? Does he not trust the Minister of Defense to deal with this? Is the Minister of Defense involved in not carrying out those instructions? That's a serious matter. And when a president cannot trust his own ministers and his own departments and instructions like that to reach the ground, well, you have to start worrying. You really have to worry, because that's not good for this country. And in another clear example of a lack of trust, the president who is now going to chair a water crisis committee, when there's already a working group on water issues, which is housed in the Department of Water and Sanitation by Minister Phemi Mojadina. Now, why would you have your own working committee, your crisis committee, when there's another one inside your own cabinet that's doing this work? It's like the president had his working committee dealing with Joburg's issues. You know, the president's just bringing everything under himself, but he's got all these ministers that are in his cabinet that report to him. It just doesn't make sense. Is it a lack of trust? Is it a lack of your minister's ability to do their work? what is actually happening here? And this itself just raises a lot of questions. Which brings us to another story this week, which involved Gauteng's visible infrastructure project like Gautrain. We now know that the infrastructure is paid off, and the Gautrain is being handed back to the government or the Gauteng provincial government. It's not a bad thing. That's how public-private partnerships work. But what's going to happen is there's going to be a new operator that's going to run this concession for another 15 years. It's important that this tender is handled transparently and that we get to know who the players are and why the people who received this tender received it. So it's a flagship project, but what we do need to see now that the infrastructure is being paid off, are the tariffs going to come down? Is Gautrain going to become more affordable to a greater population that have not been able to afford traveling on Gautrain? And is it going to be expanded? And if so, what funds are going to be used to make sure that it reaches a broader network and a broader part of Gauteng? Because at the moment it just serves a very narrow north-south corridor between Sandton and Pretoria and obviously the airport. So we need to see a Gautrain being expanded, but we also need to see this being done responsibly and transparently, because we've got to balance the prestige infrastructure projects like this with much larger transport challenges that face millions of commuters across Gauteng. And while Gautrain works well, I can tell you the commuter systems, other commuter systems such as PRASA and our bus service systems and Railvia and others are not working so well. And we need to introduce meaningful public transport for all citizens in this province if the province is going to do justice to its taxpayers' money and service to all citizens in the broader public. Speaking of Gauteng, the political temperature certainly is rising. We saw the DA unveiling its billboard mocking the Gauteng Premier Panyaza Lesufi over the water crisis, the province's water crisis. Now, what makes me laugh is the ANC now threatening and taking legal action to have this billboard removed. My goodness, do they not realize how much attention and marketing value they are just giving to the DA by doing this? It's crazy. But anyway, we'll watch this space. It's going to be quite hilarious, quite frankly, to watch how the lead up to the elections brings more and more of these types of stories. And no doubt over the coming months, we're going to see more messaging and campaigns and political positioning as parties prepare for local government elections, which brings me to our final point. The local elections are coming. And if we want a South Africa that works for all of us, we must use our democracy. That's the most powerful tool we have, and that is to vote. And you can only vote if you're registered. And we want you to take a moment to check whether you are registered with the Independent Electoral Commission. We'll put that link in the comments below, but please make sure that your details are there and they are correct and that your address is updated, because democracy only works when citizens participate. And finally, we want to just thank you and our supporters for what you do for us. If you're not a supporter of OUTA, please consider doing so. It's important that we continue to do our work, and that is to challenge corrupt government, challenge maladministration, and hold those in power who abuse their power to account, to stand up for taxpayers' rights. And so we'll keep pushing to get corruption out of here. Until next week, thanks for watching OUTA's Weekly Wrap.